Good morning. It'll be just a moment before we get started. Good morning. Welcome. Good morning. Hey, Shane. Yes, I love the background art too, Shane. This is, I think, one of the best things I always see in traveling the world is what people do to brick walls like this, as opposed to a red brick wall, highlighting that. But I'll be talking about that in just a moment as we get started. Make sure everything's set up. Okay, that's done. Okay. Okay, good morning. Welcome to my virtual weekly office hours. This week's early mural is actually from my trip to Reno last weekend. So last weekend, and we'll be talking about that in a little bit, but this was one of the interesting art pieces that I saw, and Reno has actually really become a art haven as opposed to just gambling. They've kind of pivoted, and there's a very nice river walk along the river, along the Truckee River downtown. And then they have kind of art spread throughout the city. And this was on the side of a Mexican restaurant. I really think it was a great piece of art. Hopefully that we can get something similar to this sometime soon in Sunnyvale. But I was really struck by that. And I think it's one of the better pieces that I've seen. As far as art. And, it reminds me of several things that I saw when I was in Mexico City a few years ago. But it was very, very iconic and really drew you in and made what I'll say is a boring brick building very, very interesting. So hopefully we'll get something like that in Sunnyvale. Anyway, thank you for joining me again this week. My name is Larry Klein. I'm your mayor. Thanks for joining. This is the 117th installment of my weekly virtual office hour address. Happy Friday. I hope everyone is doing well and staying healthy and staying cool. Yesterday was the beginning of a relatively warm week, at least according to weather predictions. We've now reached 816 days since the March 16, 2020 county health order started the shelter in place in an attempt to slow the spread of COVID-19. More than 2 years ago, I converted my weekly coffee shop hours into these live stream addresses, and I haven't missed a week since. People still say they appreciate hearing from their mayor each week, whether it's live or watching it delayed by a few days. And these weekly discussions allow me to answer some of your questions provide you some general information on what's happening and give you some general words of encouragement also. So thanks for allowing me to continue to represent you and work for Sunnyvale. Most Fridays like today, I'll be following up this live stream with in-person meetings on Being Seen at Being Seen on Murphy Avenue. So if you want to reserve a spot, email me and you can reserve a 15-minute or 30-minute slot, or you can just drop by, and depending upon how busy it is, if it's a quick question, I usually have time for that. So definitely you can see me on Murphy Avenue after this, most Fridays, unless I'm away. Okay, let's go ahead and get started. What's happened at the federal, state, county, and city level over the last few weeks. Last Monday was Memorial Day, and so a lot of people were enjoying themselves, either taking the kind of the kickoff for summer trips, or there are multiple Memorial Day events around the county, around the nation, to celebrate those that really gave their all and gave the ultimate sacrifice for the freedoms that we enjoy. So definitely I've had some of my relatives passed away during World War II. I had an uncle or granduncle that passed away, and my grandfather's brother passed away. My grandfather was in World War II, and I've had other friends that have passed away in some of the more recent wars. So it's good to give thanks for their sacrifices. That was last Monday. Last Wednesday was the start of June, and so June is, of course, Pride Month, and so a small group gathered at City Hall as the Sunnyvale staff, park staff, ended up raising the Pride flag. And it was back in 2019 when council authorized the raising of the Pride flag every year for the month of June. So from the beginning to the end of June, it's always raised. And it's always good to, that first year we had a mini celebration, and we had a distant celebration the following year. So, it's good to at least try to celebrate. Definitely some people still aren't completely comfortable with getting out, and I totally understand that. And, this is hopefully next year we'll have even a better celebration when we have the new city hall. And so already talked to staff about how we can make that much better next year. And then last Thursday, Alameda County health officials announced that they would be actually reinstating the indoor mask mandate as we continue to see COVID cases around the Bay Area, around the state, around the US continue to rise. So Alameda County became the first county in the Bay Area to reinstate that mask mandate after it lapsed in February. So in February, most states and counties, especially in the Bay Area, lifted their mask mandate. All the counties in the Bay Area lifted their mask mandate after that winter surge that we saw in December, January, and all that. But our health officials continue to monitor. I've talked with them. They don't think that they'll be reinstating that mask mandate. It is summertime. Most people are out. There are congregations, but at least for now, they don't consider that they'll be putting that mandate in place. Although as things change, it looks like as we get to the numbers, things have kind of stabilized, especially for our county. And then last Thursday morning, I ended up driving to Reno, and so went for the U.S. Conference of Mayors. And so this is a yearly conference, although COVID put kind of a hold on that for several years, of mayors of cities over 30,000 residents. And so there were multiple hundreds of mayors there. I think around 300 mayors. So it was great to connect with mayors from all over California, all over the United States. I met several of them several years ago, pre-COVID, at the last mayor's conference. And it's good to talk over what the issues are that everybody faces and what solutions other cities are coming up with. So it's, and, have some very, very open discussions of dealing with, issues within your city, whether or not that's issues from residents, and dealing with either response or asking for change, or asking asking for how can we get fixes to all the issues that we're have of housing, of traffic, of homelessness. What are we going to do? So it was good from that standpoint, but also it wasn't just mayors get there. We had the vice president, so it was good to see the vice president in person. And we also had lots of federal officials from federal officials from DC that were there to talk about grant and funding opportunities for our cities. We also got to hear from Ukrainian President Zelensky. And so, it was good to, hear encouraging words, also just, get together and talk about the issues facing us all. And so, it is kind of interesting to hear the discussions. And at the end of the day, there's lots of people to talk to in the city, but there's always one mayor, and that's always the thing of, okay, it's good to meet as a group of mayors and basically share stories, and talk to people that understand all the issues that you face on a daily basis. So it was good from that standpoint, and good to reconnect after so many years of being disconnected. In 2020, that conference was supposed to be in Austin. June 2020, they moved it to July of 2021. Then they moved it to September of 2021, and of course, Delta happened in August of the Delta variant happened in August of 2021, and they ended up canceling it completely and moved on to their next city, which was Reno. So it was good though. Yeah, good to be away for a weekend. And although, for 3 days, I basically didn't see the sun. It was from 7 a.m. to 6 p.m. and then usually evening receptions, but good to get some information and pass on some grant opportunities to city staff. So we'll see how all that works out. Last weekend, of course, the Sunnyvale Chamber brought back the Sunnyvale Art and Wine Festival. Heard lots of people were there on Saturday. I drove back on Sunday, so I could at least spend a few hours there at the end of the festival. But we had the mini Art and Wine Festival in October. But this last weekend's event was a little bit closer to the old ones. Lots of artisan vendors, lots of music and performances all day for both days. Wine, beer, and margarita booths. There's child's activities and business exhibits. But I heard from a lot of people, and they really enjoyed it. So thanks for everybody who was able to make it. And I think I was already been talking to the chamber, and already looking to how to make it even better next year. So great. Thanks to all the sponsors. Thanks to everybody who helped out. And I think it's always the kickoff for summer for so many folks. And so glad to see that back in downtown Sunnyvale. As for this week, Tuesday, of course, was election day. I hope everyone turned in their ballot. And as for local measures, Measure A passed. That increased the number of terms for the Valley Water Board members from 3 to 4. And as I talked about last week, I think the terminology, the wording of that ballot measure was very misleading. It was basically, it was saying we will, restrict, or we will create a limit of 4, even though the current limit was 3. And I think most people just saw that of, oh, if you want to add term limits, then that's a good thing. But we actually had passed term limits. It used to be unlimited terms. In 2010, the county passed term limits of 3 terms of 4 years by about 75%. What I saw is this is running about 55 approving that 4-year term limits, and about 45 against. Measure G seems to be passing, and Measure G, of course, is the $275 million school bond. for Fremont Union High School District, and it's for renovation and modernization of all the district high schools. And as far as the cost to property owners, it's about $16 per $100,000 of assessed value. That's not market value, it's whatever is being assessed on your property. So, because of Prop 13, it's actually means that a lot of our residents' property taxes and property values is only going up a few percentage points every year, as opposed to if you sold it, what the actual market value would be. And then I mentioned a few people last week that I had endorsed, and I think all of them did fairly well for Assembly District 26. So this is the new Assembly District that Cupertino, Santa Clara, Sunnyvale. I endorsed Evan Lowe, and he seems to look like the big winner with about 66% of the vote. So he will, basically, if you get above 50%, there isn't a primary runoff for most of these seats, especially the local seats in the November election. So it looks like he will not have a runoff. He will be our new assembly member. From State Senate District D10, so the new district that goes from Sunnyvale, Milpitas, Fremont, all the way up to Hayward, Newark, Hayward, and all that. I had endorsed Lily May. She seems to be winning with about 35% of the vote. Aisha Wahab is coming in second with about 26% of the vote. Both were good, but I've been working with Lily for many years and really think that she would do a good job. And so happy to see that she's the leader, but it looks like they will be moving on to a November election. Nobody got more than 50%. And then at a county level, I endorsed, District Attorney Rosen. And he's won with more, I think, with a similar percentage, over 60%. And so he will not, he automatically wins. And the same thing with Larry Stone, County Assessor, our previous mayor for Sunnyvale. And both of those are winning and seem to have won with more than 50% and will not have to run a November election. So good for them. And then Tuesday evening, council had a meeting and we approved several things. So we had several things on our docket that night. We approved a budget modification to receive $1 million grant from Silicon Valley Clean Energy for new solar panels and battery storage at the new City Hall. So, this is the good thing. It's great to be part of Silicon Valley Clean Energy. Sunnyvale is one of the founding members when it was kicked off about 8 years ago now. And we actually it's been less than that. It's only been about 5 years, just more than 5 years ago. But it's great to be able to put money that SVCE collects, so it's providing energy. It's a community choice aggregate. It basically provides energy for less than what PG&E is providing. And it's also getting green sources. So it's making sure that it's getting hydroelectric, thermal, and of course solar wherever it can. It's funding projects around the state, around other states nearby to provide us, Californians energy, but specifically, the Bay Area and the county energy. And then it does it at a cheaper rate than PG&E because it's not dealing with as much advertisement. It's not dealing with, its shareholders from that standpoint. All the money that it's collecting is going back into programs like the $1 million that we're getting for a new City Hall to make sure that it is net zero at the end of the day. So happy to do that and happy for what Silicon Valley Clean Energy does in our community. We took comments from a council standpoint. We do certain things every year before we approve the final fee schedule and the final budget, which is coming up later this month. We take final comments. We get, give a certain amount of questions and feedback to city staff. But so we took that, and then we approved a resolution against a potential permit for a quarry in Sargent Ranch in South County. And, ultimately, we don't normally take on resolutions, especially for something outside of our city. But this resolution paid homage to the indigenous peoples that have held, these lands for so many years before us. And I think it was the right thing to do from both an equity standpoint and an environmental standpoint. That to me was one of the big things. I've been doing a lot of efforts to fight the Lehigh Quarry expansion that's just south of Cupertino. So it's in unincorporated land that's part of the county. And this is a similar sort of thing. So, this is a quarry that would have been in South Bay. It wouldn't have directly affected us, but from an environmental standpoint, from an air quality standpoint, and just what it does to the ground, to the wildlife, what to do better from the environmental and biodiversity standpoint. It's critical that we make sure that adding a new quarry doesn't really help from a large degree. So and I've been doing separate advocacy one-on-one with our supervisors as far as that's concerned. That's usually the best way to get change. But it was good for the to hear from residents that were very very pro fighting this effort, and I was happy to hear them, and I've been talking to several tribal leaders over the last few weeks. They will actually be at our next AMD Park grand opening, so happy that they'll be able to join us as far as that's concerned. But the other half of that is just making sure that doing the right thing from an environmental standpoint, which to me is critical. And then on Wednesday of this week, we had our sustainability secret speaker series. So that's one of the things that our Sustainability Commission does every year, is we have 3 to 4 speakers come and speak on different things. Wednesday night's discussion was a changing climate through the lens of equity and resiliency. I had a conflicting meeting, wasn't able to attend, but those meetings are online. So if you didn't get a chance to attend, ultimately you can watch the YouTube meeting, and I think that's on the city's website, or will be sometime in the next week if it isn't already up there. So definitely take a look at that. I'll be watching it probably over the weekend. Let's go ahead and get to our weekly COVID numbers. COVID numbers across the nation are finally starting to stabilize. They're still trending upward slightly, but from a national standpoint, we've passed 85 million cases. That increased about 700,000 again this week. It's down a little from 800,000 last week, but it's still relatively high. Nationally, we've had almost 259 million vaccinated with at least one dose. That's 83% of those 5 and older have at least one dose, and over 76% of the adults are fully vaccinated nationwide. As for deaths, we've had over 1 million now. We had 1,005,000 deaths, another 2,000 in the last week. And then from a California standpoint, we've passed 9 million positive cases and continue to see increases, although it's starting to stabilize also. We've had about, over the last week, we've had about over 12,000, 12.2 thousand cases a day within the state. That's down from about 13,000 a day a week ago, but it's still up from 10,000 2 weeks ago, 8,000 3 weeks ago, 6,000 a week before that. So, it's stabilized. It might be trending downward, but it's still relatively high, especially in comparison to where we were a year ago, or even, at the highest rates in late summer of last year, or early winter. So still take cautions wherever you can, wear your mask wherever you can. The positivity from a test case positivity, we're at 8.9%. Of all people tested are being tested positive. And of course, that's just the official numbers. With so much home testing, you don't know how many people are still testing positive. So that is difficult. From California's had almost 91,000 fatalities, another 200 deaths just in the last week. And then from a county standpoint, we've definitely stabilized. We've had a cumulative case count now of 356,000. That's up another 7,000 in the last week. It was 7,000 a week before that, but it was 7,500 the week before that. So, we're starting to slowly drift downward from a county standpoint. We've had additional 5 deaths related to COVID in the last week. That brings our total to 2,297 deaths. And then vaccinations, Pete, we're still doing fantastic as far as that's concerned. Almost 85% of those 18 and older are fully vaccinated, and more than almost 71% of those that are eligible for the booster have already received it. So it's good from that standpoint. I continue to talk to the county and advocating on our city's behalf. I was just talking to one of the county supervisors last night, and it's good to make sure that we have that open dialogue with our supervisors. If you want to get tested, they currently closed down the testing at the Sunnyvale Community Center. So you can go to sccfreetest.org to find locations around the county to get tested, although you can get free tests at a lot of the pharmacies. And then as far as getting vaccinated, if you need to get your booster, you can go to freevax.org. I want to go ahead and talk about some upcoming events. Next Thursday, June 23rd, there'll be several events. The Public Safety Torch Run will be happening in the afternoon. And so this is the yearly effort to support Special Olympics of Northern California. And so I'll be out there with public safety, running along El Camino. It goes from Santa Clara to Mountain View, usually around 2 p.m., the hottest part of the day. Hopefully it cools down by next Tuesday. Last year was really, really hot, the hottest day of the week. So hopefully next Tuesday it'll be a little bit cooler. Keep your fingers crossed. But it's good to support the torch. Basically the Special Olympics, and that torch run raises funds to help both promote Special Olympics in Northern California, as well as raise needed funding for that. So I'll put something up on my page if people want to donate to a good cause. And then that same Thursday, there'll be a Pride event on Murphy Avenue, and that'll be happening. Actually, is that right? Actually, no, that's not this coming Thursday. It's 2 Thursdays away. Sorry, March 20. So it's March. June 23rd is actually 2 weeks away. It's not next Thursday. So hopefully, still hope that the weather is good as far as that's concerned. But that same evening, June 23rd, there'll be a Pride event on Murphy Avenue, and that'll be starting at 5 p.m. Ultimately, we had our first Pride event last year, and I think it was good to be out and celebrate Pride. It'll be co-sponsored. It's basically co-sponsored with the city, the Chamber of Commerce, the Downtown Association, Fabulous Sunnyvale, and Silicon Valley Pride are all contributing. Definitely, I've been working with the Sunnyvale Art Club, and they're doing a presentation, or they have an exhibition that I think is going to be fantastic. I've actually did a contribution to that. So lots of good things happening as far as that's concerned. There are also several grand openings coming up. I'll tell you about them as we get closer to them, but that'll be happening, I think, that same week. Burma Taste is finally having their grand opening, although they've been open for a while now. They'll actually be having their ribbon cutting coming up. And then actually tomorrow, Osh, so now Outdoor Supply Hardware on Hollenbeck, they're actually having a grand opening for their 14 stores. So, they opened up during COVID, and, they've opened up 14 stores around California, but it's a little celebration. So there will be, giveaways. There's a big discount all day at Osh. So if you get a chance, you can go by there if you haven't visited yet. It's it's good to have that variety, and especially, another retail component here in Sunnyvale. So definitely that's right near Homestead and Hollenbeck, where that outdoor supply hardware is. So definitely drop by tomorrow if you get a chance. I know that the first 100 people will get something, and then there's other giveaways and other things all day long. Tomorrow, June kicks off summer reading month at the library, and so also there's a scavenger hunt to kind of do that kickoff tomorrow at the library if you get a chance. So lots of events happening. We're in summertime and lots of things going on, of course. As far as upcoming council meetings, June 21st will be that busy meeting that I was talking about. Council will be looking at adopting the fiscal year 2022-2023 budget, the fee schedule and appropriations limits. They'll also, we'll also be taking a look at approving the draft 2023 through 2031 housing element and basically approving submittal of that draft to the California Department of Housing and Community Development. So they have to review that. They've already been, kicked back some cities because of what they've been doing with their housing element. So getting that in relatively early before next year is critical. And so that's our efforts to approve that. We've had several discussions about that already, and I think there's a lot of good movement as far as that's concerned. Let's go ahead and get to our weekly questions. If you have a question, please add it to the comments and I'll try to get to it. Eric asked, is the city doing the live concerts or just DJs on Wednesday nights this summer? So yeah, the Wednesday and actually Thursday night DJ events sponsored by, of course, the Downtown Association, and they run all those events. We help sponsor it from a city standpoint, but they are, in charge of figuring out who's there and working with the city to try to figure out how best to manage that. So through the rest of June, there will be DJs there on Wednesday and Thursday nights. So we'll have, music, but the normal Wednesday rock and the Saturday jazz, that'll be starting in July and go from the beginning of July through the end of August. So looking forward to that every summer. Lots of people, really enjoy coming out, dancing, and then just enjoying Murphy Avenue, and especially now that it's closed. But it was always closed for those events. But I do think that general feel. There's a lot more tables out and a lot of open seating along that street. So looking forward to that happening, and I think that'll be fantastic. Frank asked, when is the city hall going to be done, and when is PG&E going to be hooked up so the loud generator can finally be shut off? Yeah, Frank, I've talked to city staff about that, and I talked to PG&E. I actually met with PG&E about 2 weeks ago now, 2.5 weeks ago, I think, about expediting those hookups. So hopefully that will be done relatively soon. The addition onto public safety will be opening up in July, and then as far as City Hall, everyone will be moving into City Hall in December. So definitely things are moving forward quickly. I went by the building earlier this week to do some photos with Silicon Valley Clean Energy, and it was good to see. It's all enclosed now. There's some windows that they're starting to work on the interior. They're finally finishing some of the roof where those solar panels will go. Lots of work still to be done, but we seem to be on track. I just talked to the city manager the day before last, and he said, yeah, well, it looks like we're still on track for December for everybody moving in. So happy that that'll be done. Heather and actually several other people asked, when is the Washington Park pool actually open for swimming? Kids are out of school and it's going to be hot, but I can't figure out where to look on when the pool will actually be open. So yeah, the Washington Park Swim Center actually has been open for lap swimming for a while now. And so there were places on the city website that you could reserve that for lap swimming. Definitely, I've heard from people that have enjoyed that new pool, especially with the zero entry. For summertime, there's lots of things happening at the different pools that we have for recreational swim. So basically, it's for kids just wanting to splash in the water and all that. That actually kicks off next week. And so Washington Park Swim Center, as well as Columbia Pool, they'll be open usually in the afternoons, Saturday, about 7 days a week. As far as the swim is the Washington Park Swim Center, and I think the Columbia Neighborhood Center, that pool is open weekends and I think a few days during weekdays. So as far as that's concerned, definitely a lot of people are looking forward to that. A lot of kids are enjoy being out, outside and playing in the water and all that. But there's also, so that's usually the afternoons. They have summer swim camps. So that was one of the things and they have new lap hours that I think are also being set up for the different pools that we operate. But a lot of those were, as far as the summer is concerned, I think mornings are swim camps and afternoons are for general play at the pool. So looking forward to that. I haven't had a chance to get in the new swim center yet, and looking forward to trying it out myself sometime in the next few weeks. Let's see what else. So if you have questions, please add them to the chat. Katie asked, previously, I noticed Santa Clara and Mountain View have once again done a citywide garage sale and city garbage cleanup. Is Sunnyvale going to hold a citywide garage sale or extra cleanup days to set out junk or trash cans? So I checked with city staff. There are no plans to do a city-wide garage sale this year, maybe next year. As for extra cleanup days, you can request, on-call curbside collection for extra garbage. So single-family residents can request that twice a year, and that's to dispose of carpets, electronics, bulky items as far as that's concerned. You can also buy ticket tags for trash bags if you want to put out additional trash bags. And there are also extra dumping weekends in the spring and the fall at the Smart Station. So those are always used. And then lots of neighborhoods also have basically garbage weekends. So they bring in dumpsters and people can throw away their bulky items. There's one downtown, I think this weekend. And so talk to your neighborhood association and see if they can sponsor that and set up a date for your whole neighborhood to throw away their bulky items. Joni asked, where do I report or how do I report if I see water waste? So Valley Water has water waste inspectors that respond to reports when water being wasted around the county. And all you need to do is there are several ways you can go to the county. You can go to the Valley Water website and basically look for water waste, search for water waste, and there'll be ways of reporting that. There's also an Valley Water app, Access Valley Water app, which makes it easy to report. You can call them directly at 408-630-2000, or you can email WaterWise, WaterWise at valleywater.org. So lots of different ways of reporting, if there's issues, if you see people wasting water. As a reminder, for Sunnyvale, you should only be watering, depending on what your address is, Monday and Thursday, or Monday and Thursday, or Tuesday and Friday are the days that people should be watering their lawn. And conceivably, no water is also no watering between 9 a.m. and 6 p.m. So lots of people are still changing over their automatic watering systems and their irrigation systems. So I know that there's they're in the whole process also is you give warnings before you actually go to fines, but definitely whatever you can do to save water, whether or not that's like what I do every day is shower with a bucket, so when the hot water heater is warming up, or hot water is warming up in the shower, it's everything is being collected into a bucket. So all that's good, and then using that for our vegetable garden, for the flowers, the flowers in our front yard. Let's see if there is there an estimate? So Sharon asks, is there an estimated date for completion for the Fair Oaks Evelyn Avenue construction? So I'm assuming this is the Fair Oaks Bridge. It was supposed to be done in June, so initially it was supposed to be done in March, it moved to June, and now it's August. We're looking, I'm talking to the city manager about penalties that construction developer needs to pay. Ultimately, we need to make sure that it completes. And there were issues, COVID, there was issues because it had to be scheduled with Caltrain, and they had some issues where they weren't allowing us to do construction for a while. There was also basically migrating birds that were causing a certain amount of issues, and we had to wait for them to finish their nesting season. So lots of issues up to this point. And, part of which, of course, was just the issue of delivering equipment. The supply side issues have been difficult, but I've lost a little bit of patience with this developer at this point, and we're applying appropriate pressure. It's supposed to be August. I'm keeping my fingers crossed that it won't slip anymore, but we are looking for ways to also penalize that if it continues any longer. So sorry about that. I would like it to be done just like everyone else. Let's see. I think that's all the questions, at least what's showing up on Facebook, which sometimes doesn't give me all of the comments until after for whatever reason. So anyway, I just want to thank everyone for joining me again this week. These are still uncertain times, but no matter what those challenges we face them together. I'm proud of our city and how our residents have responded during COVID. There's been lots of challenges we've all faced, but I'm thankful for everyone who just helps out in their community, showing their generosity and empathy. I continue to see people, sharing picked fruit, having, cans of goods, or just sharing, child's toys, in boxes in front of their house for those that are in need, or just to have that general community goodwill. So thank you for everything that you do. New issues always come up, but your actions, your attitude really do make a difference. Sunnyvale will emerge from this as a stronger community. We're in this together, and we will get through this together. Thanks for listening. Be kind, be generous, and have a great weekend, and stay cool. Okay, take care. Goodbye.